My Build Back Better Act is going to reduce the deficit by more than $100 billion over 10 years.
Then he fell asleep, and they woke him up again, and he continued.
It's going to lower costs, create jobs, and rebuild our economy. Let's get this done.
It's not going to reduce the deficit. CBO says it's not going to reduce the deficit. You're lying about the cost of the bill. Okay, so Kevin McCarthy decided to try and hold this thing up. He spoke for 8 hours and 37 minutes. Now, just going to put it out there. Any politician speaking for 8 hours and 37 minutes is basically Dante's seventh circle of hell. But here is Kevin McCarthy ripping into the bill. As is appropriate, the bill is a piece of crap. It's garbage.
Mr. Speaker, we are minutes away from voting on a $5 trillion, more than 2,000-page bill. Some of its effects will be quickly felt, others not for a few years. But I guarantee you that no matter the time frame, all the new Washington spending in this bill is only the beginning of disaster.
Okay, well, that is true. And if you don't believe Kevin McCarthy, why don't you believe the Biden administration, which continues to maintain that its policies are wonderful, even as they have precisely the effect they were intended to have, crushing Americans. Yesterday, Jen Psaki defended canceling the Keystone XL pipeline despite the fact that oil prices are spiking.
I think the problem with that argument is that the Keystone pipeline isn't even really functioning. I mean, it was only partially built. It isn't even really functioning. So suggesting that changing that would lower the price of gas, I don't know that that makes substantive sense.
It looks out, and they look at where it will be in the future, and canceling Keystone pipeline, not allowing other pipelines to go forward. They challenge the other pipelines might reduce or cause a concern in the market.
Well, we look at every pipeline on an individual basis. The president made the decision when only about, I think, 8% of the pipeline had been built, not to move forward as we looked at the environmental impacts and weighed them with the economic impacts. And the decision was certainly made.
No, you did not look at any of those factors. You just knew that the left wing was fighting that over Keystone XL, so you canceled it, and then the gas prices progressed because you have taken an anti-oil and gas position in the middle of the gas price. In just 1 second, we'll talk about the Democratic Party continuing to double down on the most radical policy magic. Like, are they just delusional? Again, from a political perspective, it's going to go down in history as one of the great acts of political malpractice of all time. That Joe Biden entered office after a highly unpopular one-term president and proceeded to do everything he said he would not do, embracing the positions of the person he defeated in the primary. It's insane. It's legitimately insane. You have to wonder whether this geriatric patient is even in control of his own brain at this point to make that kind of politically unpalatable move. It's so wild. I've never seen anything remotely like it. We'll get to more of this in just 1 second. First, we're talking about the price of gas right now? Yeah. Have you seen it? Like, that sticker shock is pretty wild. I'm thrilled to introduce an incredible app that everyone who buys gas needs to know about. Get Upside. My listeners are making 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code Shapiro, get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill-up. That's 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price to pump anymore. Get cash back using it. Get Upside. Just download the app for free. Use promo code Shapiro. Get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your very first tank of gas. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back. There is no cap. The cash back gets added directly to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download that free Get Upside app, use promo code Shapiro to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your very first tank of gas. That is promo code Shapiro. And again, that's up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on the first tank. And then beyond that, up to 25 cents per gallon on every single gallon of gas, like for the rest of time. That's a pretty great deal for just downloading the app. Head over to Get Upside right now and download that app at the App Store. Alrighty. We'll get to more on all of this in just 1 second. First, history is being made right here at the Daily Wire with your help. We are the first company in America to file suit against the Biden administration for their unconstitutional vax mandate. We are pleased to see the Biden administration suspended their implementation and enforcement this week. They're continuing, by the way, to tell people that they ought to continue enforcement of this in lieu of regulation. Don't do it if you're a company. Stop it. Don't make their job easy.
Move to the next area and secure the perimeter.
What we've done so far is huge. It's not going to stop yet, okay? The fact is, this is going to end up at the Supreme Court. There are a lot of businesses who are enforcing mandates. Our victory doesn't mean anything unless those businesses do the right thing and stop this nonsense right now. I understand. You guys are under pressure from the federal government. Now you're not. So, stop it. If you're an employee, your company cannot force you to take a vaccine you do not want, or should not force you to take a vaccine you do not want. Don't let them hide behind the vaccine mandate. Unless we lose, nobody should have to comply. And we're not going to lose. We're going to win in this case. It has now been consolidated at the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. We are the lead plaintiffs in that case so far. Sign our petition against Joe Biden's vaccine mandate over at dailywire.com/do-not-comply. Send a message to the Biden administration that Americans don't just do whatever you tell them to do. Over 600,000 people have already signed the petition. The more signatures we get, the louder the message. That's why we are aiming to get to 1 million signatures. So head on over to dailywire.com/do-not-comply and sign the petition today. Also, big announcement. This Sunday, I'm joined by my favorite governor, because he's my governor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's taken a firm stance against the Biden administration's unconstitutional vax mandates, just like we have here at the Daily Wire. We sat down to make sense of it all. It is truly worth a listen. We get to everything from Ron DeSantis' handling of COVID to why Florida is drawing people down here to his philosophy of government in general. Go check it out this Sunday, dailywire.com, or on my YouTube channel, Ben Shapiro. It's a pleasure to sit down with the governor. I think they're really going to enjoy it. Daily Wire members get access to special bonus content from Sunday special episodes, so don't miss out. Join at dailywire.com/subscribe. Get 25% off with code Do Not Comply. You're listening to the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast and radio show in the nation.
Gas is closing in.
Alrighty, meanwhile, again, I don't know what is driving so many thinkers on the Democratic side of the aisle these days, but it is certainly not reality. There's a piece from Christina Wyman, who is author of the forthcoming novel Jawbreaker. She writes for NBC News. She has a piece today titled Schools Face Parents Who Want to Ban Critical Race Theory and Don't Get How Teaching Works. An educator's top goal is to teach students to think. Parents who dictate curricula with their personal opinions, ideologies, and biases hinder that goal. Did you know that teachers have none? They have no personal opinions, ideologies, or biases. Teachers, none. They're just perfect advocates of Socratic truth. Or alternatively, they want to dominate your kids and they don't want you to know what they're doing. Christina Wyman said, parents and politicians across the country are interfering with curricula in public schools to teach students. State legislatures are passing laws to be critical of race theory out of school. Literary classes like Toni Morrison's and Lewis High are banned for sexual content. School libraries are coming under attack. Obtaining books about gender. There are even parents who are trying to shield students from worrying about mental health and suicide, as though helping children build emotional fortitude is a bad thing. While the political climate and national involvement in school districts gave the phenomenon of our platform and more serious ramifications, this behavior is nothing new. Parents have always tried to interfere with curriculum, aside from when teaching middle school in the 2000s. Even then, there's no shortage of parental input in the content of my instruction and books and instruction. Part of the problem is that parents think they have the right to control teaching and learning because their children are the ones being educated. But it actually, doesn't work that way. It's sort of like entering a surgical unit, thinking you can interfere with an operation simply because the patient is your child. Oh my God. Okay, so let's begin with the false analogy between being a surgeon and being a middle school teacher. I'm sorry, did you go to like 8 years of STEM schooling in order to determine how to operate on a kidney, or did you just go to a crappy ed school where they taught you a bunch of social justice nonsense and now you think that you're qualified to teach children despite never having dealt with actual real-life children yourself very often? Like, who makes the analogy between a surgeon, like a heart surgeon, and a person whose main job is to read a curriculum designed by other people and then infuse it with their own biases? That's ridiculous on its face. Second of all, she says, parents are misinformed if they think that they can control their kids' education the way that they can control medical care. Wait, hold up. Parents do control their kids' medical care, you idiot. We do this all the time. It is our job to decide whether our children need surgery, for example. Now, once I delegate that surgery to a surgeon, I shouldn't be bursting into the room and trying to fix it. But one of the ways I pick the surgeon is by asking the surgeon ahead of time what exactly they're going to be doing. I know this because I've had to watch my kid have surgery. It's no fun. This bizarre idea that she's promoting, that when you hand your kid over to the state is now the expert on how to educate your kid, is crazy town. The analogy is proper in terms of parental action. I get to decide whether my kid has surgery. I get to decide whether my kid needs medical treatment. And I get to decide which doctor does it. But with the public schools, I don't get to decide any of that. You force my kid to go to a public school if I can't afford to go to a private school, which is why vouchers should be a thing, so I can choose where to put my kids. Of course, parents should have control over education, especially when you're talking about subjects like English or history. Yes, if a parent burst into a classroom and said, "You're teaching calculus wrong," and then suggested that we break out the abacuses. That would be silly. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the values that are taught to your kids. And so you have now democratic thinkers saying, no, 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 no. Teaching English and history and social science is exactly like teaching math. It's just incredibly stupid. Please do this, please. She talks about what an expert she is. When I first pursued teaching nearly 2 decades ago, I was struck by the list of requirements I had to fulfill for the state of New Jersey to determine I was qualified. Several years of focused college instruction, followed by intense mentorship, state-level exams, and more exams. I went to grad school. I got a PhD in curriculum instruction and teacher education. Well, whoop-de-frickin-do. And by the way, those state educational standards have made New Jersey the crown jewel, particularly inner-city New Jersey, the crown jewel of the world's educational systems. So yeah, hand it over to the experts and shut up. I hope Democrats run on this. I really hope they keep doubling down. They're just doubling down. It's absolutely unbelievable. Meanwhile, the Biden administration continues to double down. So we've discussed the case of Saul Omarova over the past couple of weeks. This is the person that the Democrats want to be comptroller of the banks, essentially, run the banking industry in the United States. She has said in the past that she wishes to abolish all private holdings of savings accounts and checking accounts. That should all be done through the Federal Reserve. So then the Fed can determine who gets a loan and who does not. She said in the past she wants to bankrupt the oil and gas industry. Yesterday, she said, it's a shock. You mean a person who's in favor of centralized government control over every aspect of the economy doesn't like Bitcoin, which is the alternative to centralized government control of the economy? Color me shocked. Here's Saul Omarova, the Biden administration's communist nominee for running the banks. And by the way, when I say communist nominee, I mean she earned the Lenin Prize at the University of Moscow and will not reveal her PhD thesis before being nominated to this position.
Do you believe that a government-issued representation of currency, of value, is superior to private commerce?
I believe that we do have government-issued money right now in this country, and it's working great. And I worry about allowing private innovation to undermine a lot of important public policies.
Okay, so Bitcoin is bad. Bitcoin is super bad because it undermines public policies and undermines the government's ability to control all aspects of the currency. Target here! It is not. Bitcoin is a great alternative to the government inflating the currency, doing whatever it wants with your dollar, doing whatever it wants with your savings. Her deep desire to nationalize nearly everything should scare the hell out of everyone. Now, the left is trying to pretend that this is not true. Right? The left is trying to pretend that she is actually anti-communist, that she is some sort of free marketeer, which is amazing since like 2 years ago she tweeted out that there was no gender pay gap in the Soviet Union. Right? Things were wonderful in the Soviet Union. She says that she chose in her PhD program to study American democratic theory, and she was on exchange at the University of Wisconsin when the Soviet Union collapsed. She simply stayed. This is an absurdity. So her academic writing about the banking industry was all about centralizing all power. Okay, so in her book, The People's Ledger, How to Democratize Money and Finance the Economy, a 71-page academic study on how to separate big banks' lending features from their role as safekeepers of Americans' savings, she wanted the Federal Reserve to replace bank deposits. There's a reason she's being defended by Elizabeth Warren. Okay, so John Kennedy from Louisiana, he went after her in pretty colorful fashion. This, of course, made many people very angry. You're not allowed to mention communism or Marxism, ever, because people might notice.
In 2019, you joined a Facebook group, a Marxist Facebook group, to discuss socialist and anti-capitalist views. Now, that's what I see from your record. And you have the right to believe every one of these things. You do. This is America. But I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade.
How dare he? How dare he? Now, she says now that she has a unique appreciation for our dynamic and diverse market. But all of the things that she has said about our dynamic and diverse markets are critical of those dynamic and diverse markets, so far as I'm aware. She said that her articles are designed to expand the boundaries of academic debate. Oh, that's what it was. She's just raising issues. Just raising issues. Okay, so Elizabeth Warren, of course, says it's a red scare. It's how dare he? It's a red scare, says Elizabeth Warren, who herself has embodied a lot of sort of Marxist ideals in her own campaigning.
Professor Omarova, I know that the giant banks object to your willingness to enforce the law to keep our system safe, and that you may cut into big bank profits. So they and their Republican buddies have declared war on you. The attacks on your nomination have been vicious and personal. We've just seen them. Sexism, racism, pages straight out of Joe McCarthy's 1950s Red Scare tactics. It is all there on full display. Welcome to Washington in 2021.
By the way, the name of her actual thesis was, quote, Karl Marx's Economic Analysis and the Theory of Revolution in the Capital. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like there should be some open questions. Sherrod Brown did the same thing. This is the senator from Ohio trying to defend Omarova.
We know that a shadowy political group funded by these personal attacks and pushing radical right-wing news sites to spread misinformation. These inflammatory insinuations continue to stoke the unhinged rhetoric that has poisoned our politics. Now we know what happens when Trumpism meets McCarthyism. It's a cruelty no person should experience.
It's so tiresome. I'm sorry. It's so tiresome. How about we find out what she actually thinks and wonder whether somebody with Marxist leanings ought to control the banking industry in the United States? But really, apparently they just think that if they keep shouting Trump over and over and over, and like Beetlejuice, he will appear and then win elections for them. This seems to be their opinion of the situation. It really is quite amazing. Meanwhile, speaking of people who continue to kowtow to the Chinese, Jen Psaki yesterday was asked why Joe Biden won't raise a COVID investigation of China. Joe Biden has been very hands-off with regard to the human rights crisis that China has been purveying in Hong Kong, the threats against Taiwan. Joe Biden has been relatively sanguine about all of this. And of course, neither he nor John Kerry brought up the COVID investigations with China, which unleashed a virus from Wuhan on the world, which has killed some 4 million people. Here's Jen Psaki trying to defend it.
Did he ask President Xi to cooperate specifically with this U.S. intel agency-led investigation into the origins of COVID?
Peter, it's clear that that's what we want. That's what we've been pressing on. I don't have any more to read out for you from the meeting.
You're saying that it's clear. Is it clear to somebody who has a Zoom meeting with the president that that's what he means if that's not what he says?
I think the president has spoken publicly on this a number of times. Our national security officials have conveyed very clearly, I don't think it's a secret. That's what we want. That's what we've been pressing for.
Okay, but yes, Biden didn't say it to Xi because he's afraid of saying such things to Xi. Meanwhile, Joe Biden was asked about a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, which are coming up in just a couple of years here. And there had already been some talk that the administration was going to do it, and Biden seems to be a little bit walking it back.
So do you support a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics?
Something we're considering.
Somebody should inform him his administration already floated a trial balloon about just doing it. Okay, meanwhile, speaking of that Wuhan virus investigation, now people are trying to claim that it was at the wet market. According to a scientist who has pored over public accounts of early COVID-19 cases in China, he reported on Thursday an influential WHO inquiry had most likely gotten the early chronology of the pandemic wrong. The new analysis suggests the first known patient sickened with coronavirus was a vendor in a large Wuhan animal market, not an accountant who lived many miles from it. That report was published on Thursday in the prestigious journal Science. It will revive, though certainly not settle, the debate over whether the pandemic started with a spillover from wildlife sold at the market, a leak from a Wuhan virology lab, or some other way. The scientist, Michael Worabe, is a leading expert in tracing the evolution of viruses at University of Arizona, came upon timeline discrepancies by combing through what had already been made public in medical journals, as well as video interviews in a Chinese news outlet with people believed to have the first 2 documented infections. Worabe argues the vendor's ties to the Huanan seafood wholesale market, as well as a new analysis of the earliest hospitalized patients, strongly suggest that the pandemic began there. But here's the thing. We're never going to find out whether this is true, because Joe Biden really doesn't care all that much about whether this is true. Joe Biden has consistently said that he wants to see China as a strategic competitor, not as an enemy. Well, here's the thing. China views us as an enemy, and they're wielding their power over corporate institutions in order to get what they want. Okay? We thought that by opening up China, we would be liberalizing China. And to a certain extent, we did. We liberalized parts of their economy. We certainly did not liberalize their political system. And instead, what they have done is they have now hooked us on the opium of cheap markets and cheap goods. That is what they have done. And they've taken our corporations and turned them inside out. Now, listen. I think these corporations are gutless. I think these corporations should stand up. I think they should not go along with this, but I also think that the federal government at a certain point, Western civilization at a certain point, has to tell the Chinese that we are going to cut them off economically at the knees if they continue to pervade the kind of political terrorism in which they are currently engaged.
Gas inbound. Safe zone relocated.
But instead, we've got corporations that are just kowtowing to them. It's unbelievable. According to Axios, the Marriott Hotel in Prague declined to host a conference of activists and leaders from China's Uyghur diaspora this month, citing political neutrality. An email shared with Axios shows. The Chinese government has condemned the World Uyghur Congress, which has attempted to rally global attention to the genocide in Xinjiang, China. The decision to reject the conference reflects China's growing ability to extend authoritarian control beyond its borders by making clear to corporations that crossing the party's red lines will be bad for business. About 200 delegates from 25 countries gathered in Prague from November 12th to 14th to elect the organization's new leadership and hold discussions with politicians, academics, and civil society representatives from around the world. The Prague Marriott Hotel declined to host the conference, as they said they were afraid of pissing off the Chinese, basically. So it's not just them, by the way. Obviously, we've seen the NBA kowtow to the Chinese as well. Enos Kanter is, I will say, he's what he's saying about China right now is just great. So Enos Kanter is the center for the Boston Celtics. They're playing the Lakers tonight, and he's going to be wearing sneakers that show Xi Jinping putting a crown on King James. He tweeted out money over morals for the king. Sad and disgusting how these athletes pretend they care about social justice. They really just shut up and dribble when Big Boss China says so. Says, did you educate yourself about slave labor that made your shoes? Or is that not part of the research? He's going after LeBron James. And naturally insulting that foolish report from the New York Times. Like, why are conservatives so excited? Well, maybe it's because LeBron's one of the richest people on earth. He's back in his reign of security. Maybe it's that. So when they're like, why aren't you so angry at Tillman or Furtado or Furtado, whoever the hell is the owner of the Houston Rockets? No one's ever heard of him. I don't even remember his name. LeBron James, however, is one of the most popular and powerful political and cultural figures in America. So yeah, that's why it's great that Enos Kanter is going after him. Good for him. Really good for him. Also, good for the WTA. So the Women's Tennis Association is now calling on China to explain what the hell just happened to Peng Shuai. Peng Shuai is a Chinese tennis player. She put up a post on social media alleging that a high-ranking Communist Party official had raped her. The post was immediately taken down, and she was disappeared. And then a statement was issued to the WTA in her name that was obviously written by the Communist Party. Clearly written by the Communist Party. Her post will be within 30 minutes of publication. Her Weibo account, which has more than 500,000 followers, is still blocked from consumption on the platform. Only Chinese state media released an email from Peng, walking back her allegations and saying they weren't true and claiming she is lying. It was clearly stated, clearly it was not true. And so this puts the WTA in the bind. Do they alienate the Chinese to stand up for this player, or do they simply kowtow to the Chinese government like the NBA? Good for them. The WTA was like, nope, we're not doing it. According to CNN, head of the Women's Tennis Association, Steve Simon, has said he is willing to lose hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business in China if tennis player Peng Shuai is not fully accounted for and her allegations are not properly investigated. Simon said in an interview Thursday with CNN, we're desperately willing to pull our business and deal with all the complications that come with this. This is certainly good news for business. Women need to be respected and not censored. Good for him. Seriously, more updates. More updates. Simon said, when you factor in the commitments to prize money and the commitments to the WTA, when you factor in the stadium building real estate elements, it's over $1 billion commitment they've made to the WTA finals and the WTA in Shenzhen. But apparently, they wanted to pull out. Serena Williams also devastated. I'm devastated and shocked to hear about the news of my peer, Peng Shuai. I will be safe and found as soon as possible. This must be investigated and must not stay silent. Naomi Osaka also released a statement. Hashtag where is Peng Shuai? We'll see if any of these people have the stones to separate off from Taika or continuing to do business this way. But at least they're speaking out. And honestly, really, credit to Serena Williams. Even if she's not hypnotized with Nike, her speaking out against the Chinese government and risk pissing off is a good thing. LeBron is just pathetic. Pathetic world cosmetic on behalf of the shoot up stands up for the Chinese government. So I'm glad to see more people standing up for the Chinese government. It's deeply necessary. All right, we will be back a little bit later to show how it's working. First, I can't forget to end your video. These shows every Friday. Same Executive producer Jeremy Horn, our supervisor producer production manager Pablo Whitehouse, associate producer Justin Barker. The show is edited by Adam Syed. Audio editing production assistant Vincent Grant. Production producer is Daily Wire. Copyright Daily Wire.
Got gas moving in. Stay sharp. Gas is closing. Get to the new safe zone.
Get the fuck out of here.
You were 1 of 5 remaining.